Welcome to another episode of Conduct Detrimental. I am Dan Lust, joined this week by friend of the show, John Nucci, recent graduate of Penn State Law and golf law aficionado. What's up, John?
Hey, Dan. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Of course. So what we're going to do this episode is a special one. So listeners of the show will know we mainly cover football, baseball, basketball. We cover the main sports. But when we tell you guys there's a story worth paying attention to another sport, usually we're on point. I remember, John, an episode that you remember very fondly was our Super League Symposium episode. We did a deep dive into soccer. This is a rarity for Conduct Detrimental. We are only covering one topic, and it happens to be one that is not football, baseball, basketball, or hockey. It is golf. So unless you're living under a rock, and I've polled my casual golf friends, everyone seems to be aware. They kept saying, Dan, you got to cover this. And you know what? We did. We called in the experts. We're going to have Shon Crewe over at Northwest Golf Show at Seattle Sports, ESPN Radio Seattle. Spoke to Shon once upon a time. She's their golf correspondent there. She hosts her own golf show. She's going to join John and I for a conversation about what's going on. Again, I guess it's the PGA Tour versus LIV Golf. It's an entity formed out of Saudi Arabia. There's Saudi Arabian money backing it, but it's our first kind of competing league that really stands to challenge the incumbent. So you could talk about the XFL. They're not challenging the NFL anytime soon, right? You could talk about the American Basketball Association back in the day, or even the big three. They're not challenging the NBA. But this is our first league in many years, maybe since the USFL or the WHA in hockey, that are really challenging the incumbent sport. So you have John, what do we want to call it? The LIV Golf Association? We're just calling it LIV.
I guess LIV Golf works.
So, yeah, this is what we're going to spend the whole episode talking about. We're hearing lots of money being thrown around. Phil Mickelson going to get $200 million. Dustin going to get $125 million. But all in this, John, is the backdrop that you spoke about in our last episode. The PGA had been giving kind of these veiled threats that any golfer that associated with this league risked being disassociated with the PGA Tour. So, John, why don't you paint the scene for our listeners before we kick it over to Shon?
It's been happening for quite a while now. The PGA has, as you mentioned, thrown out some threats ranging from fines to suspensions to lifetime bans. Obviously, that kind of perks our ears up when we hear things like lifetime bans, because the question becomes, is that legal or not? The PGA has not officially made a response. As of right now, the first event is scheduled to kick off in 2 days in London. So it kind of remains to be seen how the PGA themselves, or the PGA Tour, I should say, they're separate from the PGA, but how the PGA Tour will respond. It just came out today that the USGA did say that LIV players who are already qualified for the US Open will be able to compete at the Country Club US Open next week. So that was kind of the one of the first stones, is how would the majors react? Because as you know, the majors are kind of separate from the PGA Tour. So the majors are not operated by the PGA Tour. And I think a lot of players, if they're able to move over to LIV and defect and maybe make some money and still play in the majors, then I think that adds a whole different dynamic to this. But if the majors start, excluding these guys one by one, then that might have a whole different set of consequences, especially on the antitrust side.
So names that maybe our casual golf fans will know, right? Graham McDowell is a fairly big name. Louis Oosthuizen, Kevin Na, Ian Poulter, Lee Westwood, Dustin Johnson, and Phil Mickelson. And again, we kind of alluded to it, but the numbers being reported out there, you call them rumors, whatever you want to call them. Phil Mickelson is supposed to get $200 million, and then Dustin Johnson $125 million. And we're going to go over those numbers with Shon. A little bit of the rumors as to what Tiger may have been offered to join. You can imagine if $200 million is being offered to Phil, Tiger's going to get substantially more than that. But yeah, so listen, there's a lot of money being thrown around. I don't think the question, and maybe we'll grapple with this, but why golfers are hesitant to join. Certainly it's not the money, it is the optics. And we'll see. Maybe the ramifications of being not allowed to play in certain events. And certainly if that happens, John, we're going to have you back on, Shon back on, and maybe even do another symposium like we did once upon a time for the Super League to really figure out the golf ramifications here. But rest assured, right? There are lawyers looking very closely at this from all sides. And remember, Jack Nicklaus was once thought to be maybe part of this venture. He was involved in a separate lawsuit that we didn't cover between his own foundation. It's a story for another time. But yeah, this issue is certainly ripe with legal issues, and maybe at the heart of this too is that PGA golfers are not members of any type of union. So the question as to whether or not someone can be a part of two sports leagues simultaneously. I don't know, as an independent contractor, maybe you should be allowed to. Certainly as an NBA basketball player, you can't compete in two leagues at the same time. But if you're an independent contractor, that's the whole point. You're supposed to be able to choose your employer. So yeah, I don't know, John, anything that we're missing before we kick it over to our conversation with Shon?
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. These golfers are independent contractors, so there's no union representing them. They can kind of do as they wish. However, they do agree to abide by the PGA Tour rules and handbook, which is kind of where the authority that at least the PGA Tour and their governing board is getting their threats from. So they're granted a certain number of players were granted a certain number of releases each year. They can play in a certain number of conflicting tournaments, but they've kind of drawn a line in the sand when it comes to LIV and said if you're you're in or out.
Listen, we're going to follow it closely. This is one of these episodes where we're telling you the legal issues are very pervasive. Maybe the story in our conversation with Shon is setting the stage. Maybe at some point that'll be the facts presented in a hypothetical article, John, that you might write for our site. You are one of our more popular writers on the site. So, John, I think that sets the stage appropriately. And with that said, Shon Crewe, I met Shon about a year ago when we were doing some NIL stuff. She asked me dig into the NIL on the golf side, which we did. We had a really good conversation. And since then, I've been following Shon's insights on really all things golf. And I woke up this morning, a lot of my, casual golf fans were saying, are you guys going to cover this on Conduct Detrimental? And I'm like, you know what? It sounds like about time. So, I reached out to Shon and she was ready to go. So again, Shon is the creator and host of the Northwest Golf Show for ESPN Radio Seattle. And she's a great follow on social media. You can find her at Shon Crewe, SHONCREWE. With that said, let's kick it over to our conversation with Shon Crewe.
Shon, welcome to Conduct Detrimental. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you, Dan?
I'm good. So we have a golf-specific episode today. So I was wrapping my head around who potentially could be a guest for this. And I remembered once upon a time you and I were talking golf and I'm like, we check out Shon's feed, and then I see that's all you're tweeting about. So
that's all I talk about.
Well, it's a big story, big enough that it is making, usually the Masters is going to be a front page sports story and, all the big majors. But this is a story that is not just percolating sports, it's percolating the legal field as well. So we thought it important enough to dedicate a full episode to this. So we've got John here, our resident PGA and golf expert, to help break it down. But Shon, the floor is yours. What should our listeners know right off the bat about this mega dispute that might be trending its way towards a mega legal dispute?
Well, I think this is something that's been brewing for a while now, a few years at least. And, one of the things I think from the business side of things is you can never get too comfortable with what you're doing. And this model that the PGA Tour, it's been around for many years. It was a spinoff of the PGA of America. And, I think that you've got players who are looking at opportunities and saying, hey, what else could we be doing? It was only a matter of time before someone else was going to come in and try to see what they could figure out. We've known that this may have happened. I think we were initially looking at the Premier Golf League was the initial league that was looking to come in, but the Saudis were able to launch LIV Golf, which officially kicks off this week. And again, not a surprise. I think that it's maybe a little more surprise at the players, some of the players that are coming on board. But no, I think this was always just going to be a matter of time.
I guess on that, and then we'll kind of get to substance. The list of players, I think, was the surprising thing, because we've known for some time they were throwing money around, and I think it's not a surprise to anyone that it's Saudi Arabia has a lot of money. But I think the actual roster they put together, it surprised me. I think the biggest name on that list is probably Dustin Johnson. Now we see Phil Mickelson involved. And then the other names on the list are names that people are familiar with. Maybe not like, I don't want to say like top tier guys, but names that the golf world is very familiar with. So they've managed to put together a fairly competitive roster. So maybe, Shon, you could speak to the type of players they're targeting and maybe the compensation that is rumored to be heading towards Mickelson and DJ.
Yeah, well, I think Mickelson, we've known, he hinted, back in February, that he wasn't really happy with the PGA Tour. He made some comments that, basically saying that there was obnoxious greed, and he really didn't like the lack of media rights. So we had a feeling that Mickelson was going to be someone that may potentially be making a move, and sure enough, he did. And, what was interesting about him is that usually someone who's talking out of both sides is trying to play up both angles. In his case, he put his foot in his mouth, I think, on both sides with the Saudis and PGA Tour. And with that, ended up having to take a step back. So we didn't hear anything from him for 4 months. And then yesterday, he finally put out a statement, basically, first addressing that he took the time off to work on being a better version of himself. And then he talked about coming back to golf, being ready, and taking advantage of this new path and this fresh start with LIV Golf. golf. Interestingly enough, I think he's their big money maker. At this point, it looks like it's about $200 million that they've offered him. And this is, again, just the contract to get players participating. There's actually extra money involved in how they perform within these events. But, when you look at a guy like Phil Mickelson, 57 professional wins, 6 majors, he's a big ticket guy. That being said, he is a little bit older and, so maybe not a total surprise that someone like him, where the next best phase for him might be looking at, say, the PGA Tour champions. Could this be an interesting, compelling reason when you've got the money and maybe an opportunity at something new and exciting? I get that. But I think Dustin Johnson was probably the one that everybody was most surprised by. And probably because he is a little younger still, 37 years old. He's doing well enough. I mean, he's a guy who's had 28 professional wins, won 2 majors. He's someone that, I think my take on him is that at this point in his career, I think he's looking at the opportunities where he can compete with the big stuff. So the majors, which right now PGA Tour doesn't have any involvement with the 4 majors. So whatever he does with LIV, he's still got the door open for the majors. And then I think the money. I think he's a past FedEx Cup champion. $15 million he's made in 2020 just for winning the FedEx Cup. So I think this idea of more money was compelling. He's probably the biggest surprise. And then you've got a lot of other guys who I think you're probably, I don't want to say it's the 40-something-year-old player that maybe be looking at, what else can he be doing? And this may be a new way to go. But after that, I think those are the 2 big names. And Dustin, by the way, I think his offering was about $125 million. So this is not small change.
You're absolutely right. That is kind of the profile. DJ was certainly surprising, especially after he released a statement. I think it was back in February. That was seemed pretty unequivocally in support of the PGA Tour. Although I think there was some speculation at that point that maybe he didn't really write that. But the profile of golfer in this league is, as you mentioned, kind of older, towards the end of their career, maybe hasn't been extremely competitive on the PGA Tour lately, and they're taking the money, because it's maybe their last big opportunity to make that money. And that makes total sense. There are a couple of other surprising ones. The U.S. amateur champion, James Piot, I don't know how to exactly pronounce his last name, but he also signed up. I thought that was a fairly risky career move, given that the PGA Tour has obviously stated how they might respond to it. So for the U.S. amateur champion to sign up too, that was pretty surprising to me.
Money talks, so is it that surprising at a certain point, right?
Well, no, and Jonathan, that's a good point, especially these younger players. You look at someone like Taylor Gooch, who's also, he's 30, but still young enough that you think, okay, you're playing well enough. You might have some more opportunity in front of you. Taking this risk where you're going down a path that really has, basically no footprint. You don't know what it's going to look like. I think it is a risky move for a younger player, especially with a lot of opportunity. So, the only thing I can think of is the money is the draw.
The other thing too, which we were kind of alluding to, right? If a guy like Mickelson's going to get reportedly $200 million and DJ's going to get $125 million, God only knows what someone like Tiger Woods would got. Is there any numbers out there being floated what Tiger would have gotten or might still get? I have no idea.
It's a small one, but close to $1 billion. $1 billion.
It sounds like we're doing a Dr. Evil promo right now. That's just funny money. But the truth is, right? If Dustin Johnson's going to get 125 and Phil's going to get 200, I don't know, use normal economics. I guess maybe that makes sense.
Yeah, do the math. Of course, it's going to get you to about $1 billion. But what does that say then that he turned it down? That he said, no thanks to this. I think that's more compelling. It kind of shows that he's definitely, at this point, look, he had this amazing comeback after that big accident last year. And, obviously just reported today that he's not going to be playing in the U.S. Open next week. But he is someone who I think is, if he can continue to build his legacy, and he has on the PGA Tour, why not? But like I said, I think it says a lot that he decided to turn that money down.
You also mentioned legacy. I think Tiger, at least certainly more than DJ, is motivated by legacy quite a bit more. DJ has always been kind of a go with the flow, do whatever. I remember last year they were asking him about his putter. He was like, I have no idea what this is. It's just a putter. They give it to me. So I think more than the others, Tiger is very motivated by legacy more than the others. So he's also made boatloads of money in endorsements outside of his tournament earnings, although what DJ is reported to have earned is more than Tiger has earned in his entire career on the course. So.
Well, and I was going to ask you, I don't know what you guys think about this too, but there was certainly this curiosity of, well, let's say with Phil, for example, because people have wondered, has he kind of shot himself in the foot with his legacy? I've wondered how many people think that there's an opportunity to build a new legacy with the LIV Golf Tour, as opposed to it just being about money. I don't know if you guys have an opinion on that, but that was something that I had thought about too.
It's interesting. I mean, I guess at a certain point too, we should hit on this. Like, certain golfers are losing marketing and sponsorship deals, right? Phil's lost a handful and Dustin's losing some, but at the end of the day, like, what are sponsorship dollars worth if you're getting paid, exponentially more? At the end of the day, like, if it's going to hit your bank account, it doesn't really matter if it's coming from the sponsorship or it's coming from your actual employer. But maybe that's it. I think, what are the golfers playing for? They're playing for championships. They're playing for pride. If you're not able to compete for the Masters or any type of majors, and you could win a different event, maybe it's, I don't think at this point we could say that the LIV, the event that's going on in London next week is a Mickey Mouse event. They're still going to be professional golfers that have won major championships at a really high level. And let's just call a spade, that are getting paid more, at the same, if not more, than the PGA Tour event. So what defines an event as being like the pros, right? I think compensation to some extent. So maybe people are trying to develop a new legacy. I certainly could see that. But at the end of the day, right, I think seems the optics that this is a pure money grab. And that's what maybe the league has to do to get off the ground a new, upstart like that, like we saw back in the day with, the USFL, trying to compete with the NFL. They had to give a lot more money. Same with the American Basketball Association. So for those listeners that are like, this is unprecedented, that another league is coming in and trying to compete with the PGA, it's not. It's happened before, and it usually happens with an entity throwing around more money. It's just rarely a league backed by a country that wants to throw around, FU money, so to speak. And that's, I don't recall anything like that ever happening.
I'll just add to this. I mean, look, it's one thing, and I had heard Mike Wan, who's the CEO of the USGA, talking this morning. He actually said something that I had been thinking about for a while, and that is, it's one thing to kick something off and declare what you want something to be. It's another thing to actually execute it. I mean, this is a business model. And while there is a lot of money that they're throwing out there, as Juan said today, it's one thing to launch a business, it's another thing to build a business that works for the long run. So I think one of the things we're going to need to pay attention to and see is, how are they building this to make it exciting? I mean, if you remember last year, early on in the pandemic, I can't remember, I think it was DJ and Ricky, I can't remember the tournament. I watch way too much golf, but when they were covering it, it was just a friendly event. And I remember thinking, this is the most boring golf event I've ever watched. And part of it is understanding, the production value and being able to bring kind of the entertainment aspect of what you're watching. On top of it all, fine, you've got money to throw at this, but at some point, people who are throwing money at this want to see that they're making money, and that's where, traditionally sponsors have been a part of that. So it'll be interesting to see how they build this and actually make this a business beyond what we're hearing about today.
Yeah, and that statement earlier today, the one you're referring to, I believe this is where they were kind of announcing that at least for this 2022 U.S. Open that LIV golfers that were already qualified will be able to play. What are your thoughts on that? It seems like they were very careful to specify that it's this year and that golfers that were already qualified again. It seems like the door may be open for changes next year and beyond. But I mean, some of these guys, Phil, DJ, are going to be exempt for a little while regardless. So just curious what you think about that.
Well, and I don't know if you guys recall this, but last year what had happened as they were starting to hear, the rumblings and this was really picking up more momentum. What you saw was basically the PGA Tour and the USGA and the RNA, who's the governing body in Europe, basically coming together and saying, we're going to try to kind of form a band together a little bit better. And they had not traditionally done that as well. I'm not saying that the USGA and I think the PGA Tour have always been fairly good about it, but bringing the RNA in, to me, that says that they're trying to be more mindful and strategic, especially around these majors. Again, the PGA Tour doesn't run any of the majors. You've got Augusta National membership. They run the Masters. majors. You've got the USGA running the US Open, you've got the RNA running Open Championship, and you've got the PGA of America running the PGA Championship. The PGA Tour has the fifth major, if you know, the unofficial fifth major, if you want to consider that with the players. But ultimately, the best way the tour can kind of protect their influence within the majors is to band with these organizations that have influence on the majors. So my thought is that those conversations and those relationships are growing stronger. So perhaps there will be some change or something to be considering different for next season.
I guess we're going to have to watch it, Shon. We might have to have you back on as we monitor this. But, you know, as lawyers, we are continuing to watch what the PGA responds here. As John mentioned, you know, the Open maybe avoids one battle, but we'll see what the fight is moving forward. Shon, we really appreciate you joining us. Anything that we should know? Any parting thoughts on the way out?
No, I mean, like I said, I think it'll be interesting to see this first event, how it kicks off. I don't know if you guys caught the press conference, but it sounds like there was already some drama with that. And, you know, one of the AP reporters was trying to ask some questions and while it was wrapping up, and I guess he got escorted out. So in true Saudi form, it sounds like they're keeping things exciting. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Other than that, you know, I guess we'll have to just wait and see what the rest of the week looks like.
Shon, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you having me.
So again, that was Shon Crewe, the creator and host of the Northwest Golf Show over for ESPN Radio Seattle. So, John, I really think the interesting part here, right, is that we don't know what the next chapter is going to look like. Certainly, we talked about what the U.S. Open is planning to do for their next event, but that doesn't speak to any of the other majors that we're looking at, right? And we're in the middle of the golf calendar over here. We're just about to hit the heart of summer. So there's a number of events that are going to pop up. I don't know, John, anything that we should be paying attention to as lawyers, sports fans on the golf front?
First and foremost, how the PGA Tour itself is going to respond. That's going to kind of set the stage for almost everything else. But the other thing is the other majors, the other governing bodies. So Augusta National Masters is until April of next year. So they have some time to see how this plays out. My guess is they'll sit on the sidelines a little bit and see how things shake out over the next couple months. The RNA, who runs the Open Championship or the British Open, they have also yet to kind of make any statements as to where they stand. So, yeah, we'll wait and see how all these majors respond and how the PGA Tour itself responds. I know a lot of sponsors have already responded. RBC pulled their sponsorship of Dustin Johnson, which coincidentally, their RBC Canadian Open is the same weekend as the inaugural LIV event. So RBC was one of DJ's longest sponsors. So that was a little bit of a slap in the face. But yeah, so I guess on the antitrust side, we're going to wait to see what the PGA Tour says, and we're going to wait to see what all of the other major governing bodies say before we can see exactly how this is going to unfold.
Well, pay close attention to it. Again, we're just here reporting the story. We are not trying to take, any type of legal position in this, but we're obviously going to keep an eye on it. And, even when the PGA Tour decides to make a firm position one way or the other, certainly you'll be hearing from us again. So, John, listen, you joined us today. I told you that we had a golf episode planned, and you dropped everything that you were doing. But, John, why don't you fill everybody in? I feel like you're in the middle of doing something pretty big right now.
Yes, I'm in the middle of the wonderful world of bar prep with Themis Bar Review.
Oh, wait. Did you say Themis Bar Review? The sponsor?
I did say Themis, the number one bar prep company on the market. I'm in the middle of secured transactions, which for any listeners out there that have not gone to law school, I highly recommend you learn all about secured transactions because it's some of the most thrilling stuff you'll ever learn in your life, being as sarcastic as I possibly can.
But it's fun when it's Themis, though. I mean,
it's great. It's great.
Imagine if you were taking that with the hypothetical other bar company who we are contractually obligated not to mention. That would be terrible.
It would make life a lot worse. That's for sure. And
that's assuming that the system didn't glitch out on you and kick you out of bar prep for that day. Not to mention any company that we can't name.
Allegedly, hypothetically,
allegedly, that we're being tagged on Twitter for not doing the best things and asking if they could switch to Themis
on day one of bar review. I understand.
This is certainly allegedly, hypothetically, reportedly, but I did see those tweets. So those are a public record. So I did see those. So, John, in addition, you posted about it online, but we sent you to commemorate all your hard work for our show. We sent you over a nice shirt, Conduct Detrimental shirt. So that nice picture, you posing with Themis Conduct Detrimental. You made us look pretty good in Themis circles, but we certainly appreciate all your hard work. Some of the articles you wrote for us have been some of the most, I don't know, I'll be a little transparent, but it's some of the most well-read articles we've had on our site. You covered McGregor, you covered PGA. So, listen, if other people want to get involved and be the next John Nucci, John Nucci's graduating, he's going into practice. We don't know if his law firm's going to be as kind to allowing him to do all this stuff. But listen, it's a good way to get your name out. And John, you've certainly been a pretty good example of that. A pretty good shepherd leading the charge over here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. I'd like to take advantage of my NIL opportunities with the conduct detrimental shirt and the famous review post, but hope to maintain my appearances here.
Maintain your eligibility, unlike what we're not sure it's going to happen with the PGA front. That's a good way to put it. As a reminder, this show is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. If maybe golf is not your flavor, we appreciate you sticking with us this whole episode. This is a pretty golf-heavy episode. John, actually, let me ask, before we talk about Underdog Fantasy, what do you think my golf handicap is if you just had to take a guess? Just looking at me, just eyeballing me.
I mean, you're an athlete, so that's the most important. I think you're an athlete. That's the most important thing. I'm
impression of an athlete.
When I'm overthinking my golf swing constantly, I try to remind myself, you're an athlete. Just hit the ball. I'm gonna give you a 17.
Yeah, a little too gracious. I'm closer to 20, but I'm pretty competitive. I'm the type of guy. I'll hit a big drive. I'll hit a big iron, and people are like, your handicap's not 20. That's BS. And then I'll shank one in the woods, and I'm like, oh, there he is. There's the guy. But yeah, I am I play golf with my dad pretty regularly, so watch the sports very closely, and especially now as a dad, father of two, it's pretty fun watching the Masters. So there's something that feels special, all the history and whatnot. So yeah, so again, if not, I'm sure a lot of our listeners play golf. Maybe they don't follow it, but if you are not necessarily watching golf, you want to bet on the traditional sports, you want to play some daily fantasy or season-long fantasy, do it at Underdog Fantasy. Basketball, we're in the midst of the NBA Finals right now. They have a lot of tournaments running. Hockey, our New York Rangers, team of the Kind of Detrimental podcast. John's got the hat on. He's showing it for our listeners. Heartbreaking loss game 3. But we'll see. I still have hope. So congrats to the Rangers. Congrats to the Warriors, the Celtics. Congrats to the Colorado Avalanche. Not congrats to the Tampa Bay Lightning. I hope they get the opposite of congrats. I hope they get hexed and cursed. Okay, Underdog Fantasy. Our promo code is conduct over there. Again, $100 match bonus. We don't just say Underdog Fantasy. We want you guys to use them. They are a friend of the show, so you got to support them. John, I think we're good. Anything that we did not hit upon?
No, I don't think so. I'm just kind of excited to see how this plays out. I thought the PGA might respond immediately, but they haven't yet. So I guess they're keeping us on our toes, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the one that we're going to pay attention to, and Dan Wallach's going to join us for our next episode. Obviously, we saw the reports on the Deshaun Watson 24th civil complaint filed with some new allegations. And I will say, if you just read the reporting, it looks as if these particular allegations were not, put it this way, I don't think the crack team of Rusty Hardin was ready for these particular allegations. They're usually ready to go with any type of response. They have everything ready. These are not new. We've known about this for a while. A little bit of, cat got your tongue. They weren't saying anything. And then this is obviously coming off of last week with Rusty Hardin with some really ill-advised comments. If anyone was following us on social media, we tried to hit them and explain the significance. But these are these comments, the quote-unquote happy ending comment, which, we were on the show a week ago. And I don't want to bury this all because Wallach's going to talk about this all when we're on next time. But we spent a lot of time on this podcast last week talking about how good Rusty Hardin was doing with the media. I listened to his interview with Gabe Feldman, friend of the show, and I was really impressed at how Hardin was kind of explaining how they've kind of tricked Tony Busby into filing, these criminal complaints, which launched, the grand jury proceedings. And then, there's a risk when you talk to the media this often that you might trip up and say the wrong thing. So all of that positive momentum went complete about face, a complete 180. And now Rusty Hardin, the lawyer, and he's been in a lot of these high-profile cases, he's faced with this unique scenario where it looks like the lawyer messed up the case. And Tony Busby is now put on record. He's saying that he's going to use these happy endings, hey, it's not illegal if you make someone uncomfortable comments. He's going to use that against Deshaun Watson, which, listen, I don't know. I never would have said the term happy endings on social media. Even now, I'm like half joking, but it makes me uncomfortable to say it now in radio interviews. And he said it very tongue-in-cheek, almost colloquially, and I thought it was, for lack of a better term, just incredibly inappropriate for this type of case to say it. You could say some forms of massage can be consensual if you pay extra compensation for it, but he went there, right? He said the quiet part out loud, and then he tried to walk it back and say it was a hypothetical, which I guess you were just hypothetically saying an inappropriate term on air because it had no relevance. So I don't know, John, I'll give you the floor. What any thoughts on this? I know you and I didn't prep this, but it's interesting.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And I think not only did he say he was going to use them against them, I think he already did. They referenced them in the filings, the most recent ones at least. They referenced that quote directly. So yeah, it was certainly a big trip up, kind of one that really, as you mentioned, just stalls the momentum that they had. So yeah, pretty bad blunder there.
Certainly an interesting topic. John, thank you so much for continuing to follow the story, keeping us apprised of it in the show. And good luck with bar prep, my friend. And go Themis. Themis, top bar prep company in the galaxy.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And with that said, we'll see everyone next time on another episode of Kind of Get Your Mental.